Hello there, Commonwealth from me. We're less than a week away from Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. While it's easy to write this game off as yet another Zelda Muso spin-off, we can't forget that it's actually a canon prequel to Tears of the Kingdom. That's right, no alternative timeline nonsense like from Age of Calamity, which sanitized the tragedy that took place during the Great Calamity. With this in mind, Age of Imprisonment has the potential to greatly impact the Zelda timeline, by being the first, not the Legend of Zelda game in the timeline. And we can't wait to see how it will make its mark in the next few days. So be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell, and let's get into Age of Imprisonment's big Zelda timeline debut. If you thought the Zelda timeline was irrelevant, think again, as last year's Echoes of Wisdom had an official timeline placement in the end of November, 2 months after the release of the game. And that is, being almost at the end of the Downfall timeline, after A Link Between Worlds and Triforce Heroes, but before the original Legend of Zelda. Not only that, it also gave us new lore about the creation of Hyrule, placing it both at the very beginning and pretty late. But how? The vast nothingness of Null that existed before the 3 golden goddesses took over. They formed Hyrule and trapped Null within the Triforce. It's clear that Nintendo still cares about the Zelda timeline, with new games being added to it, even if Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom appear to be so far removed from it. However, with Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, there's an opportunity here to expand upon the timeline significantly, as it is breaking new ground with the first canonical story in a Zelda spin-off title. The first canon game by Koei Tecmo is, in a way, an origin story, though to the world of Breath and Tears.
Age of Imprisonment is set in the distant past, where Zelda from the present is sent to help the first king of Hyrule, Rauru, and Queen Sonia. In Tears of the Kingdom, these story moments were only told in fragments, with many important details left up in the air. We saw the most significant plot points, like the assassination of Sonia and Rise of the Demon King, but nothing in between. No details were shared of the founding of Rauru's Kingdom of Hyrule, nothing on Ganondorf's origins, and we don't even see the sages unmasked, which we fortunately will see in Age of Imprisonment. Our biggest curiosity is if and how previous Zelda games within the timeline will be referenced, because let's be honest, some of us were confused when Princess Zelda traveled back in time thousands of years to meet the first king and queen of Hyrule. We didn't know if she was sent to the era after Skyward Sword and before Minish Cap, or if this was confirmation that the Wild Era was in its own branched off timeline set after the other 19 games in the series. We know for sure that those previous games happened at some point in history, with past characters mentioned by name in cutscenes and wall writings. Zelda even references a Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time, and Twilight Princess during Link's knighthood ceremony in Breath of the Wild. However, these past segments in Tears have to be set after the original Zelda timeline, as the Demon King was sealed for thousands of years, leading to his release in the present Hyrule, and obviously he was not sealed in the games preceding the Wild Era.
That doesn't mean those previous games couldn't be referenced in Age of Imprisonment. Perhaps Rauru could explain how he founded his version of the Kingdom of Hyrule, and in the process, referring or at least touching notes of the stories of past Zelda games. Since Rauru is a Zonai, legend says that these people descended from the heavens, which could have some implications tied back to Skyward Sword. After all, the Skyloftians started first on the surface, then went up to the sky, and eventually, after Skyward Sword, returned back down to the surface to become Hylians and eventually founding Hyrule. In that sense, Age of Imprisonment could be an origin story for the Wild Era of Hyrule, explaining how it was formed from the chaos preceding it. And the best part of Age of Imprisonment is that most of it will be an active, ongoing story in the present as of the distant past, instead of being told in segmented flashbacks, though there are hints towards that as well. This was a problem in Breath and Tears, as the most important moments in those games were limited to unplayable memories. Thankfully, Age of Imprisonment is essentially going to be one playable memory, from the moment Zelda lands in the past until the moment she makes her sacrifice. It will be a story full of dark moments, and one red thread that is continued in Tears of the Kingdom. In other words, exactly what we wanted Age of Calamity to be, an accurate retelling of the Great Calamity that was met with the destruction of Hyrule, the death of the champions, and Zelda's task to seal Ganondorf for the next 100 years. Instead, we got some time-traveling nonsense through Terraco the Mini-Guardian and its attempt to rewrite the timeline. You know, Terminator style. But with Tears of the Kingdom, there was a somewhat successful end to the story, though not without sacrifices. But with this balance, we have the promise that Age of Imprisonment is canon. And yes, we'll get that tear-jerking ending, and most likely more context as to what happened with the sages after Zelda went up to the skies.
These characters are mysterious, not just because their faces are covered, but also because we don't know what happened to them after the Imprisoning War. One might think, since they're more or less carbon copies of the champions, that they met the same tragic fate as them, but they're never actually seen dying, nor revealed to be dead. If they survived the battle with the Demon King, it would be interesting to see how they continued their lives, if only for a brief moment. And obviously, we want to know more about who they are and what their personalities are like, because let's be honest, they were just exposition devices in Tears of the Kingdom. There are many opportunities for these characters to have great story moments. Speaking of that, let's talk about this adventurous fella, Calamo, who looks to be the Zreo of Koroks. Yes, they all wear masks, but this one has a hat. Joking aside, he may be more important than we realize, as Nintendo describes him as a boisterous Korok roaming Hyrule in search of a place to put down roots. Put down roots? You know what else has roots? The Great Deku Tree. We didn't see him in any of the flashbacks in Tears, nor in the trailers for Age of Imprisonment. He could likely be around somewhere, but a more exciting revelation would be that Calamo puts down his roots in the Great Hyrule Forest, growing for thousands of years to become the old and wise Great Deku Tree in the era of the Wild. However, the most mysterious character in Age of Imprisonment is this construct that looks a little familiar, doesn't it? I guess it was too much to ask for a Zelda game without Link, even for a spin-off. Fortunately, this is the coolest and most creative way to include him in the game, while at the same time not including him.
It bears some resemblance to Minru's construct, though it is uncertain whether she created it with Zelda's guidance. After all, this could have belonged to a past hero who died and the Zonai then made sure to keep, just in case. But then again, we already know that Zelda told the other characters before the start of the Imprisoning War about Link, so his existence isn't exactly a secret to at least King Rauru. And he again told Ganondorf in his dying breath, resulting in the opening where Ganondorf attacks Link and Zelda in Tears of the Kingdom. Yes, it is a full circle. And speaking of full circles, the Demon King's army, as it is possible that Rauru enlisted the help of Minru and Zelda to create a construct resembling the hero who would slay Calamity Ganon in the far future, all while giving him some transformation abilities for sweet aerial combats. The real question is whether this construct is more than just a machine. Does it contain the spirit of the hero? After all, Zelda, and thus the Triforce, contains of three elements: hatred of the demon, blood of the goddess, and the spirit of the hero. But if so, which one? On the paper, it shouldn't be the hero of the wild, as he won't be born for another possible 100,000 years. So some have then resorted to the earliest incarnation of Link from Skyward Sword, while other yet have resorted to theorizing that it isn't the spirit of the hero, but instead the spirit residing in the Master Sword, who we all know is fire. Her signature sound played once in Breath of the Wild and again in Tears of the Kingdom upon being damaged. So what better payoff to get than actually releasing that spirit and putting her into that construct? Then again, the Master Sword doesn't show up in the distant past until after the conclusion of the Imprisoning War. That's right, there are many questions that are still yet unanswered as we get to the launch of this game, as she might not even be referred by name or speak for herself. Instead, just spreading the familiar notes and sounds that we know from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. In other words, three possibilities, but naturally the most likely is of the Hero of the Wild and later Tears. Though I want a logical explanation as to how this spiritual sharing from the distant future to the distant past would work.
Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment may be a spin-off Musou game, but it's the most significant one, as it represents the end of the Wild era in The Legend of Zelda. Think of these three games as a trilogy story-wise, albeit not released in chronological order. We're hoping there's a reason why Koei Tecmo and Nintendo decided to make this the final game in the Wild era. We may know what happens in the overarching story, but everything that happened before it could have serious implications for the open-air games and Zelda timeline in general. Even if it's set in its own branched-off timeline, that doesn't mean new information couldn't reveal itself and change the origins of Hyrule's creation. We saw this with Echoes of Wisdom. It could very much happen in Age of Imprisonment as well. we can't help but focus on the Zonai descending from the sky, which is exactly where the beginning of the timeline takes place. Truthfully, Nintendo may not reveal where Age of Imprisonment fits in the Zelda timeline for at least a few months after release, if at all. But that doesn't mean we're not going to find out for ourselves like we did with Echoes of Wisdom last year. But now, we want to hear from you. How do you think Age of Imprisonment is going to impact the Zelda timeline? Let us know in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching until the very end.
If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like, subscribe and press notification bell for more Zelda videos, as Age of Imprisonment is almost here or here if you're watching after the release, and the same goes with a new game in the Zelda timeline. A big thanks as always goes to you for watching until the end, and to all our patreon.com/comearound patrons. Special shoutouts go to Raw Producer, Jonathan, and Heroes, Cheryl, Garrett Hoy, Holly Wolf, and Kintaro. You all rock, and please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.